They danced until their feet split open, until their bones cracked, until their hearts gave out. No music played, no joy filled the air, just the sound of leather soles scraping cobblestone, the gasp of exhaustion, and the eerie silence of a city watching its people die in rhythm. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg was already drowning in misery. Hunger gnawed at bellies, disease crept through alleyways, the Rhine had flooded, destroying crops and homes. The poor scavenged for moldy bread, the rich locked their doors, and then, as if summoned by the suffering itself, a woman stepped into the street and began to dance. She didn't stop, not for food, not for sleep, not for the blood pooling in her shoes. Within days, dozens joined her. Within weeks, hundreds. They danced until they collapsed. Some never got back up. This wasn't a festival. It was a plague, and it remains one of the most disturbing medical mysteries in recorded history. Strasbourg, a free imperial city within the Holy Roman Empire, sat at a crossroads of trade, religion, and political tension. Its timber-framed buildings and winding streets bustled with merchants, pilgrims, and peasants. But beneath the surface, the city was cracking. An early 16th century was a time of immense suffering across Europe. The continent was reeling from decades of war, famine, and plague. The Black Death had decimated populations just generations earlier, and its specter still haunted every cough and fever. In Strasbourg, the Rhine River had recently flooded, destroying crops and homes. Food was scarce, prices soared, the poor starved. Malnutrition weakened immune systems and disease spread rapidly. Religious anxiety was at a fever pitch. The Protestant Reformation was beginning to stir, challenging the authority of the Catholic Church. People feared divine punishment, demonic possession, and the wrath of saints. The Church preached that sin could bring plagues and that only penance and prayer could save the soul. In this climate, the line between spiritual and physical suffering blurred. Medieval science was primitive. Physicians believed in the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and thought illness came from imbalance. Mental illness was often attributed to hot blood, evil spirits, or divine retribution. Treatments ranged from bloodletting to exorcism. Fear and ignorance ruled. Strasbourg was a power keg of fear, faith, and suffering, and in July 1518, it exploded. On a warm morning in July, a woman named Frau Trophy stepped into the narrow streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. She didn't smile, she didn't speak. She simply moved, jerking, spinning, trembling. She danced for hours, then days. Within a week, more than 30 people had joined her. By the end of the month, the number had swelled to around 400. The dancers weren't celebrating, they were suffering. Eyewitnesses described them as pale, drenched in sweat, their feet bleeding, their bodies convulsing. Some screamed for help. Others stared blankly as if possessed. The city's leaders were stunned. Physicians examined the dancers and concluded they were afflicted with hot blood, a condition that, bizarrely, they believed could only be cured by more dancing. So, the city built a stage. They hired musicians, they cleared space in the town square, and encouraged the dancers to continue. It was a catastrophic mistake. The scenes that followed were grotesque. People danced until their bones fractured, until their hearts gave out. Some collapsed from exhaustion and died where they fell. Others suffered strokes and seizures. At the peak of the outbreak, it estimated that 15 people died each day. Families watched helplessly as loved ones wasted away. The city's economy faltered. Religious leaders preached sermons about divine punishment. Physicians scribbled notes, baffled by the phenomenon, and the dancers kept moving. The plague lasted for nearly 2 months. It wasn't until early September that the mania began to fade. The remaining dancers were taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, the patron saint of epileptics and dancers. There, they prayed for absolution. Many recovered. The dancing stopped, but the questions remained. Unlike many medieval mysteries, the dancing plague of 1518 is well documented. Reports come from physicians, city council records, cathedral sermons, and chronicles written by local scholars. One of the most detailed accounts comes from the physician Paracelsus, who later studied the event and concluded that it was a form of mental illness triggered by spiritual distress. City records showed that Strasbourg authorities were deeply concerned. They debated whether the plague was divine punishment, demonic possession, or a natural illness. They consulted doctors, priests, and astrologers. They spent money on musicians, stages, and religious pilgrimages, and they recorded the deaths. The event was not isolated. Similar outbreaks of dancing mania occurred in Germany, Switzerland, and the Netherlands between the 14th and 17th century. In 1374, hundreds danced through the streets of Aachen, foaming at the mouth and screaming in pain. In 1237, a group of children danced from Erfurt to Arnstadt, a distance of 20 kilometers, but none were as large or deadly as Strasbourg's. Centuries later, historians and scientists still debate the cause of the dancing plague. Several theories have emerged. Ergot poisoning. One theory suggests that the dancers consumed bread made from rye contaminated with ergot, a hallucinogenic fungus. Ergot can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and spasms, symptoms eerily similar to those seen in Strasbourg. It's the same fungus linked to the Salem witch trials. However, critics argue that ergot poisoning would have affected people randomly, not in a contagious wave. Mass psychogenic illness. The most widely accepted theory is mass hysteria or mass psychogenic illness. Historian John Waller argues that the extreme stress, fear, and religious fervor of the time triggered a psychological outbreak. People believed in the curse of St. Vitus, and that belief manifested physically. In other words, they danced because they believed they had to. Religious cults and heretical sects. Some sociologists propose that the dancers were part of a fringe religious movement, using dance as a form of worship or penance. Others think it was a protest or unconscious rebellion against the suffering imposed by church and state. Neurological disorder or epilepsy. A few researchers have speculated that the dancers suffered from a rare neurological condition, possibly Sydenham's chorea, which causes involuntary movements, but this doesn't explain the contagious nature of the outbreak. After the dancers were taken to the shrine of St. Vitus, the outbreak slowly faded. The city returned to normal, but the event left a deep scar. It was remembered in sermons, medical texts, and folklore. Artists like Peter Bruegel depicted dancers in agony. Scholars used the plague as a case study in psychology, sociology, and the power of belief. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of the most chilling examples of how fear, faith, and suffering can manifest in the body. It challenges our understanding of illness, community, and the human mind. In a world still plagued by stress, misinformation, and viral hysteria, the dancing plague feels eerily relevant. Mass psychogenic illness has been documented in schools, workplaces, and even online communities. The human mind is powerful and vulnerable. So what really happened in Strasbourg? Was it a curse, a fungus, a psychological break? We may never know. But one thing is certain, for 2 months in 1518, a city danced itself to death without explanation, and it could happen again without explanation.